Let's discuss stability and mobility versus passive stretching and flexibility. So people always get tight and they want to stretch. I see that every day in practice that people are sore and they feel tight and they complain that they're stretching every single day, but they feel the next morning when they wake up again, it's just gone back to normal. So let's discuss this a little bit more. Now, when we look at mobility and stability, it's all about active control, neuromuscular stabilization. We want control throughout the range of movement. It is usually dynamic, so it's a lot more stability throughout wider ranges. We look at movement control. It's very much performance focused and definitely more controlled motion. Now, when we think about stretching and flexibility, it all comes down to a muscle, whereas mobility is more joint related and stability through a range. We think about flexibility, just passive lengthening of certain muscles, and it is normally more of a static or in range position. So think about just trying to lengthen a piece of string. It might only go to a certain point before it actually breaks. So there's a lot of genetics that play a role in mobility versus flexibility as well, both of them. But there is definitely a lot more research indicating that we can actively change mobility through active training and rehab versus stretching having very limited outcomes and long-term effects. It can definitely provide short-term relief, but unfortunately that is where the research stops showing significant changes. So if you think about, for example, you have a hectic workout, there's a lot of new exercises, new movements, or bigger lifts, you're stiff that next day. So research indicates that no matter amount of stretching that you do post exercise, it's not going to change or have any significant change or effect on that DOMS or that delayed onset muscle soreness, which means that that stretching that people crave so much when they're tight only has limited, if any, benefits at all. Now, what actually happens in your brain needs to feel safe. If a joint to your brain feels unstable, either due to muscle weakness, that you're just not doing enough lifts or any strength training at all, or if there's functional instability, which is very common in movement dysfunction. So if we're not activating and engaging the correct muscles at the correct time for the correct movement, your brain starts feeling unsafe. It picks up that potentially these joints are at a risk to have an injury or potential tendinopathies may ensue. So the muscle isn't doing its job and the brain has to take over to try and take charge of that stability in the joint. The more we stretch and lengthen that muscle, the more your brain is going to try and pull that muscle tighter. And that's why you'll wake up the next day feeling very tight and stiff again, because that brain wants to lock up the joints and hold them safe and protected. So when we think about stability and creating a stable joint, that is strengthening the muscle throughout the active and the full range of the joint, which is then going to make the brain feel safer, which means there's going to be less need to start stretching that muscle. Neurologically, your mind can relax, your brain can switch off, and it can release the tension through the muscle because the muscle is doing its job in stabilizing that joint.